For those of you that did not get the agenda and the attachments, we will mail those out to everyone today so that you have them. We weren't sure how many people were going to be attending. Oh, they already went out? Okay. Well, good morning. I'm Irma Guzman. I'm with Procurement Services, and Chad Elms, also our trainer for Procurement Services. Today we have Teresa and Joyce from Finance, who will be, and Gary will be at the desk there. One of the reasons we decided to do this procurement finance review is because there's been questions, some issues with processing invoices and not marking it partial or doing condition codes, so it closes out your POs. We also are going to address some of the changes to the purchase orders that Finance has requested that are mandatory on the accounting line. So they're going to kind of explain all that to you as to why those are going to be mandatory fields now. And if you got the step action table with the meeting notice that I sent out to the CAPAs, you'll notice that I highlighted the changes in yellow for you so that you would know what those changes are. Also, I know that some of you already know that we have to have a commodity line for each accounting line, and so we're going to kind of go over all those things that have changed since we started our training, because there's been changes since training. So it's kind of a good overview for everyone, even for us, and to know what's going on in your departments and issues that you're having so that we can clarify for you also, and for you to know what changes that we're going to have to start with moving forward. I think the hard error for the procurement purchase orders is going to be October 1st. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Teresa and Joyce, and Chad and I will be jumping in. Gary's going to be at the computer there and showing you on the screen the areas that we're going to need to change or how to do condition codes and so forth and so on. But we'll have a question and answer period at the end. But if you have questions during your time, just raise your hands, okay? Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming. I'm Teresa Finley, a finance supervisor in finance that oversees accounts payable. And I've only been in this position since June, so I haven't been throughout all the AP training this past year. I was doing some other stuff in the system, so you'll have to bear with me. I won't have all the answers. Rosanna was supposed to be here today, but she had some other things that she had to tend to. But between Joyce and I, we're going to try to fill in for her.
And Gary might be able to help also.
Yes, right. And Joe wasn't there. CGI Joe wasn't there this morning. I would have brought him with us.
Well, he probably will show up eventually.
Okay, all right. Okay, so literally I've only looked at this material this morning because this was kind of last minute. And Joyce Mowerman, she's our accounts payable supervisor. So between the two of us, we'll go over these things with you. I think Irma may have been working with Rosanna and Robert Harwood.
Right.
And Robert Harwood is on vacation right now, so he's also would have been attending as well.
So maybe we should start with the purchase order portion of it and move into the invoice portion of it, so that way it kind of flows for everyone.
That sounds like a good idea.
So if you want to bring up a DO so that,
You want a DO or PPI 3?
either one.
Okay.
So in the step action table, there's been a couple of changes. Most of you know, I hope, if not, you'll learn today, that your purchase orders now are going to have a multiple commodity line with accounting string. And so then I'm going to need you guys to explain why that's going to happen. And then Robert and Joyce and Finance went through these, and if you go to page 5, for those of you that have your step action table, in here, under the CL description at the bottom, it says, note, if you may need to insert 2 or more commodity lines if part of the PO is taxable and part is not. Differentiate the taxable and non-taxable lines at the end of each CL description as a T for taxable and NT as non-taxable. So what Robert here was wanting is that when you go into the commodity line and you know that you have two lines or one line that's going to be partial taxable, partial not, at the end of this description line, once Gary brings it up, I'll show you, he wants you to put an N or NT so that when you go to do your invoice, apparently that kind of shows up so that you'll know if you're doing the taxable line or not. That's the way it was explained to me. So I actually need you, one of you ladies up here so that you can help explain that. So, oh, right here, under CL description, if you know that you're doing a line that's taxable, he wants you to put T for tax. If it's a non-taxable line, he wants you to put NT. And then again, it'll correlate with this taxable, non-taxable line.
Do you have anything to add, Joyce?
So can you elaborate on that for us, please?
Yeah, unfortunately,
Can you please speak to?
yeah.
Because we are recording this and it's being streamlined, so when you're asking or we're talking, we need to talk into the
Okay.
microphone,
I didn't know that either.
please.
Okay, a lot of times on your invoice, you might have like shipping that's not taxable, or there's other items that might not be taxable, and then other commodities that will have to be taxed, or, you know, you have to differentiate between the two items. So that's the reason for the two lines.
Now, will that translate over to the insert IN document so that when they're trying to make the payment against that line, is that why he wants that, so that you
Yeah,
can
so they can-
differentiate which one's taxable, which one's not?
Yeah. So
Okay.
you can put
Does
the tax-
that make sense to you guys? Questions? I have two, so Kimmy, and then I'll come back to you. Oh, hold on, let me get you the microphone. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
Oh, good, Joe is here, so Joe, I'm gonna need you up at the front, please.
Thank you. I was wondering, do we also do that for DOs?
This will be for all purchase orders created, PDI 3s, PN 3s, DON IV 3, I can never say that, DOs.
Yeah, for everything that needs the
For
two
everything.
lines.
I'm sorry, I had another question over here.
When they're setting up the DOs or the PDI 3s, they need to know what tax is going into that. Can we change that on our side when we're paying the invoices? If they've entered Phoenix, can we go back and enter Glendale?
You can, you just gotta be careful that you're not gonna hit the tolerance, which is set at 10% or 300 or less. Yeah, $300 or less.
We have another question here.
Okay.
Okay, I'm not sure if I'm misunderstanding, because on the procurement side, we actually, if it's shipping or fees, we actually put on there that there's no tax.
But you have to
We
have-
actually select that already, so.
Correct.
We know that. So apparently what's happening is that when people are going in, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is what I've been told, goes in to pay their invoice, that taxable, you don't know if that line you're picking is the right line. So this way, it's kind of a clue for you to know that the line you're picking is the one that had tax or no tax, because it doesn't populate over to the IN if this is what I've been told. So correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
I don't know, does it not populate on the island?
I need you to speak into the.
It might, but if it's the incorrect one, it might not. Yeah, but it's always a good idea to look at your DO. You can actually have more than one Advantage screen opened up, more than one session. So you can have two screens with your document, with your Advantage opened. So you can look at your Word document at the same time you're creating your IN.
We highly recommend you do that.
Okay, so then the next thing that, you guys can stay right here. Number 11, under the commodity,
Hey,
yes,
you want me to just do this, and you guys,
sure.
you guys will kind of speak to make
Oh, okay. So can you guys, here, take the microphone and let them know if it's,
So if you guys look up on the screen now, what I did is what I hope what they're looking for, all right? So you see I have commodity line 1 right here. This is gonna be a taxable one, and I think what they want is, you got the description and then a T for the taxable, right? So down here, there's a tax profile, it's Phoenix. So there's Phoenix tax on this particular line, okay? All right, then on line 2, this is the non-taxable line, and the reason this is non-taxable, let's say this is services, and certain services aren't taxable, right? So this is airplane services. I said the first line was buying an airplane, that was taxable. The second line is airplane services, non-taxable, right? Then they have, I think they want you to put this NT like that, so it's easy to identify. And then down here on the tax profile, that should actually be like that, no tax, okay? Yep.
In order to create a DO with a no tax line, does that line have to appear on an MA? So do I already have to have a no tax line on the MA in order to create a DO with a no tax line?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes you do, yeah. When you're creating any line on the DO, in order to create a DO, there has to be a COM line on the MA, right?
but what she's asking, correct me if I'm wrong, is that, does the, what she's asking is when we're creating MA documents, the contract, do we have to add a commodity line, duplicate commodity line, one with tax and one with no tax profile?
I think you do, because it throws an error. I can test it. I don't remember off the top of my head.
Okay. Then if we can clarify
But-
that.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say,
Well,
You've
most
been
of them
able
are
to
set up
change
with
it,
no
right?
tax right now. I mean, there's no tax on most of the DO COM lines right now. Not no tax, they're blank.
so then I guess we need to discuss that and find out if we need to go back
Okay.
and fix that. Okay. All right. And then, anything else there?
No, I just wanted to
Okay.
show them what it should look like.
Okay. So now we're going to go to the accounting line, which is another change to the DO. And all purchase orders for that matter. 11, while a commodity line is selected, populate general information tab in the accounting section. The note is that each accounting line requires its own commodity line if multiple, we know that. Under, you insert your accounting line section, you do your secondary, insert new line, but here the change is when you enter your accounting line, there is a section there, if Gary can bring that up, that has line description. Finance would like, this is gonna be a mandatory field. They want you to make some type of reference on that accounting line, be it FY17 rent, a building address, although it's a workman comp, temp service, some kind of a code to describe what that line is for. Thank you, Rosanna. And here comes our subject matter expert. So, finance can talk more about that. And then, Gary can bring it up while you're doing that.
And I think the purpose of having the fiscal year in there at the very beginning with some form of a description is really for financial reporting purposes, so they can query on that. Does that make sense? Scroll down, Gary.
Oh, right there, right. Thank you. So that line there will now need to be populated with some type of information. And we gave a couple of examples in the step action table, and it's highlighted in yellow as a change. So if that is not completed after October 1st, you're going to get hard errors. Pardon me? What page? Oh, sorry. 7. Number 11. Questions
So hard error means that if we don't go in and modify every single one of our DOs today,
No,
then we
no,
have to.
no. This is only for new purchase orders created after October 1st.
Thank you.
Yes. And CPI, if you have any comments, please come in.
DOs don't carry year to year, so why would it be any year but FY17?
This is a finance question, I don't know.
I don't know the reasoning behind whether it wants to come in. But that's the only thing I can tell you.
It was more of an example of the type of information that could go in there. Okay? Any other questions? Oh,
So if there's an existing purchase order right now, we modify it after October 1st, are we going to have to add that bill?
Gary?
Yes. So there's a table called doc control, and what it does is there's a checkbox that says certain fields are required or not required. Currently, this field, this accounting line description on the accounting page is not required. So going forward, like Irma said, any new ones will definitely require it. But the way the system will work is any time from October 1st going forward, whether it's a new purchase order or a modification, if that field's not populated, it will ask you to populate it. Existing ones that are final and you're not modifying, you don't need to do anything. I think somebody already asked that earlier, maybe it wasn't clear. But yeah, existing ones, you don't need to go back and modify every single purchase order you've already done.
Okay, any other questions? So, that's pretty much the changes to the step action table and to the purchase orders moving forward as of October 1st. Now we're gonna go, unless you guys have any other questions in regards to purchase orders that you would like to clarify or ask, now we can answer. Hold on a moment.
Can someone briefly touch on the new savings tax rate where it's over $10,000?
Yeah, that came up in the sheriff's office, and so Robert had decided we would have a separate line for that, so that you can have the certain tax rate for your one commodity line at a certain rate, which is the 8.3, that's up to 10,000. And after 10,000, it's a different rate, so it's the easiest way to do that would give it its own separate commodity line, so it can apply that tax rate for anything over the 10,000 for that single item purchase.
Only for a single item over 10,000.
Like a vehicle. Right. So if you're purchasing, a bunch of computers and that adds up to 10,000, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about one item like a car would be a good example.
One combined line with 8.3 tax, another combined line with another accounting line with whatever the new rate is. Okay, so they go commodity accounting, commodity.
So you have, if you have different commodities on your DO, and they all have different accounting strings, for every different unique accounting string, you have to have a separate commodity line for that.
So here's the issue with the invoicing part. So on an invoice for all you CAPA folks, there is no way that an AP person can determine what accounting line goes with what commodity line. Because when the invoice is populated, it's just based on commodity. They no longer can see an accounting line. Okay? So they can go look at the DO and stuff like that, but it would be advantageous to somehow put something on your accounting line, somewhere on the description, what accounting line goes with what commodity line. Like like Fund 100 or something like that. That would help your AP person. Does that make sense? Questions?
And some agencies have been using activity, right?
Yeah, you can use whatever that you feel is appropriate for your area. So with this type of situation, that's why we really need the CAPA folks to talk to the AP people. We're all intertwining, you know? We work together, so that's what it is.
Oops.
Okay. Any questions? Okay. So now I think what we'll move on, since we have pretty much covered the changes to the purchase orders, is to the actual payments being made, the IN, the insert. So for this, I will turn it over to finance, the subject experts, and Rosanna. So let him know what screen you need.
Rosanna, did you want to? Oh, I didn't know.
Well, so we should probably cover this, you know. I just put in there what their number. So let me go ahead and, hey Gary, will you go to the insert table, please? Thank you. I'll put that right here. I have a big mouth. I mean, I'm so loud, I don't need the speaker on me.
It's for recording purposes.
Okay, I'm sorry. We're going to go to the insert table. This is where the accounts payable people look for their documents. I'm going to just have Gary look for one of the award documents that are out there. This is what they basically see. That way the CAPA people will see they're just looking for an award document. Okay, so I'll just have him search for anyone. If you could just select one, Gary, that would be great. And we're going to select one, and we're going to select documents invoice. If you notice on here, here's what they would see. But to the right of it, you see invoice, invoice final. So we know that this document is already final. If it wasn't filed, the boxes would be unchecked, and they could go ahead and select this to invoice. Okay, so this is what the folks from AP will see. It tells them the unit price and the quantity here. So it gives them some detailed information about it. If you notice, there's no accounting in here, right? So it's hard to determine what accounting here, but it does give them the combined lines associated to it. So let's try the tools one, if you don't mind, Mary, or one of those that I can do. Yeah, that one.
You want to go ahead and invoice?
Yes, if you don't mind, so. Thank you. So if you notice, Gary checked the box, it brings it to this, box right here where they would put 17, the document ID, and it creates the document. So with that 17, as you all know, is associated with the fiscal year. So we're going to go ahead and create the document.
Actually, I'm going to back up because we went kind of fast. So let me back up, right?
Okay, thank you.
So what we're doing here is, for the AP people, an invoice is going to come in, and the invoice hopefully will have the purchase order number on it, so that you as the AP person can find, hey, this is the purchase order I'm paying. You want to match it up, right? So let me go back for a second. So in this example, for the AP person, the invoice comes in from the vendor, and hopefully the purchase order number is on the invoice. So in real life, this would be the process. I, as the AP person, I'm going to go to the invoice search table. The paper invoice has the purchase order number, so I can search for the purchase order I'm trying to pay, and I type it in. And then I'm going to go ahead and search for it. voila, it just does come up. Now, if it doesn't come up, you need to do some more searching or some more research, because in order to create an invoice, we want to create an invoice that pays an existing purchase order, right? So you need to come to this invoice search table, this InSearch, search for the purchase order you want to pay, and when you find it, like I found it here, then you can select it, and you can hit this link that says select lines to invoice, and this is the process by which we're going to create our invoice document, all right? Now, on this particular purchase order, there's one commodity line, so we're going to invoice this. Now, it's possible the purchase order has 8 commodity lines, and you're only going to invoice some of them, okay? So you have to kind of figure out, oh, here's the vendor invoice, they're invoicing for 4 lines. If there are only 4 lines on the purchase order, you can hit this button right here that says invoice all lines. If there are 8 lines on the purchase order and the invoice only has 4 lines, then you need to figure out which of the 4 need to be invoiced, and you would check this checkbox by the line or lines that you actually want to invoice, okay? Once you've done that, then you click this invoice link, and it'll take you to a screen where we're actually going to create the invoice document. And it defaults in this department code from the purchase order, and then we're going to do auto doc numbering. You guys should know this. Right now, you guys are putting in 17 for fiscal year 17. I'm going to put in 16 because I'm actually in a test environment that has prior year data, okay? And then finally, you click on this button that says Create Document, and now it creates the invoice. Okay. All right, go ahead, Rosanna.
Thank you. As you notice, all the stuff is populated. On the vendor invoice number is the actual vendor's invoice number. So that paper document you'll receive will be the actual vendor invoice number that you'll enter in the vendor invoice number ID. So that's brought in there. On the extended description, you could put additional information on that tab, but not necessary. But also there's the description on, I'm sorry, Gary. On the description there, anything that's populated is populated from the award document, so your PDI-3 or your DO or whatever. If you want to enter in more information, you can at this point, okay? You could leave it as it is, but that is populated based on the award document. So that brings in some description, okay? So we're going to go to the vendor tab now.
Hey, Rosanna, you want to speak to invoice date versus tracking date? And
Yeah,
then
that's a good point, yeah. So the invoice date, what Department of Finance has done, the invoice date is the day you entered the document, okay? The tracking date is the date that is on your invoice document. So your paper document that you have, that is the actual invoice date, okay? So that's what they put. And the reason why we're doing that is we're gonna try and use that date because it takes out discounts. So we're gonna get the best of your discount on the date that you entered the document, okay? The date tracking, the invoice date is the date that you received that invoice. So if it's received today, then you need to enter that date on the invoice date.
Can you ask that question?
Okay.
'Cause I don't know if everybody heard
The question
it.
was, what date is put on the invoice? Is it the date we received that it's stamped in? And yes, that is the date that we want to enter on the invoice date. Is the date you stamped it into your office, okay?
The reason for that is, let's say the invoice date is July, the date the vendor has on his invoice is July 1st, but they don't send it in or we don't receive it till July 15th. We want to put July 15th on the invoice date field and July 1st on the tracking field. The reason for that is to calculate prompt payment discounts, if we didn't receive it till the 15th, we shouldn't be on the clock starting the 1st. And the invoice date field is the one that the system actually uses to calculate prompt payment discounts. So that one should be when you or we as the county actually receive the invoice, right? They may date it 2 weeks before. Well, the clock shouldn't start for us then. We can track that information in the tracking date field, but we don't want to calculate discounts off that field.
We have
And
a
that-
question here.
What's the chances of actually naming those fields to what they actually are? I mean, an invoice date is the date on the invoice, but now we're using it as basically either the authorization date by the division chief or the date stamp. And now we're using a tracking date as the date on the invoice, so their fields are actually mislabeled technically. And
I'll give you a quick answer. You can change field labels. It's not free, it's not easy, and honestly, it can be done. I'm not certain it will be done here.
it'd be less confusion, especially for new AP people as well as people switching, so, I mean.
And just to let you know, also DOF have some FAQs out on their website, and this is one where one is on that, and it explains that information.
It is misleading. It seems like it should be just the opposite of what it is. I have to constantly read it myself because I can't keep track of it. Yeah.
If the invoice was created before the vendor was activated, then when we need to backdate, what date?
That's correct.
Invoice
So,
date or tracking date?
no. So let's say we have a vendor that was created on August 23rd, okay? But you got your invoice, let's say August 25th. I know it's a little confusing, but it looks at the activation of the vendor when the vendor was created. So you would have to use August 23rd. I know that's a little confusing. It won't happen much, but it could potentially happen. Has not happened yet because all those vendors that you have already been entered before July 1st. Right. And the vendors do register, so you got a new vendor that could register today, but an award document hasn't been processed yet. And so that award document too has to be entered the day that the vendor registered and was accepted and approved by Department of Finance, okay? So it could be August 23rd, but your award document is not entered until, you know, let's say you already did it ahead of time, you're just kind of waiting for that vendor to be updated. So it could be August 25th before Elena gets it approved, so you'll have to backdate that award document to August 23rd for it to get through. It's kind of confusing, but that does make an impact when that vendor was entered in the system. That's correct.
Product ships.
I totally agree with you.
And we could lose the discount because of that.
I
if we're
totally
not
agree
careful.
with you. There's no disagreement on that part. You should really not invoice until your shipment is received in hand.
So the invoice date should be the date the invoice was received, but not before the product was received.
I would say that. Now, that's more of a business process, so I can't speak on that behalf. Elena said the vendor you could have received the product already, but the vendor has not been established in Advantage. So that is possible, okay?
Right. I'm not sure that you'd be able to issue an award document, would you?
Well, she said maybe they hadn't completely registered. That's what she's thinking.
So, but I still can't issue an award document
That's
until
correct.
they're activated, right?
That's correct. You can't issue an award document unless they're activated.
So in theory, I shouldn't have an invoice before I at least have an award document or the product,
I
right?
agree with you.
Okay. On paper. Yeah.
since we're on the topic of discount terms, when creating a PO, there are two sections that have the discount. One under the vendor tab and one under the commodity tab.
Correct.
Now, we've run into a couple issues where some of the vendors, the discounts aren't loaded, so we enter in the commodity. Which one supersedes what?
The vendor, if the vendor has it at the vendor tab, it goes through the entire document, okay? So if it's entered on the vendor level, it will hit all commodity lines. If you need just one specific commodity line that has discount, you should just not put it on the vendor line and put it on the commodity line.
Anytime we try to modify the vendor line, it always defaults to what's on the MA. So the vendor line can't be modified. Done it several times.
You could modify the commodity.
Correct. So
That's
is it,
correct.
so the commodity one is the most important? Is that-
Correct.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure.
And just to let you know, let's say you entered an discount terms on a commodity line, and then AP sees it's a better discount or something comes by and they got the invoice and the invoice is a different discount amount. The invoice can be changed on the commodity line on the invoice.
So
there's a
Roseanne,
discount tab.
in that instance, the commodity line would supersede the vendor discount.
That's correct.
Okay. We added that to the handout, so that note's on there just to remind you, the commodity will supersede the vendor discount.
Hey, Kristen, there's actually so many places in the system that has vendor discount. It's on the vendor table. It's going to be on the master agreement. It's going to be on the actual delivery order at the vendor level and at the commodity level. And then finally, it's going to be, can be on the invoice. So the order of precedence is kind of the reverse of that. So if it's entered on the invoice, that's what's going to take precedence. If it's on the order com line, that's going to take precedence. If it's not on the order com line, then it's going to go to the order vendor line.
Visible for the discounts, like 1% 14 is one, for example. I don't think it's visible, or at least that's how I've been told. Correct me if I'm wrong. Let's say I get the invoice, I don't know, day 10, and I want to pay it. I won't see it until day 14. And if it's incorrect, let's say somebody screwed up and put 30, I won't even see that until day 30.
What do you mean?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that has nothing, because you can see, an AP person can see the discount on the invoice. There's a discount tab on the commodities, or there's also one on the vendor. I'll have Gary, will you go to the vendor tab so they can see that there is a discount information. If it's populated from the award document, they can see it at this point. There's also one on the commodity line that's a discount tab, and they can see that. They can change this. AP can override this, what it originally said. Does that make sense? That's through VSS though, right?
I guess that's through VSS. I'm talking about when the invoice actually comes in. I know they can go in the DO and see what the discount says. I'm talking about when the invoice comes in and they're trying to pay it.
So same, if they're entering, let's say the vendors entered the invoice and it comes through from VSS into financial, okay? Maybe they didn't put a population of the discount on that invoice. It's a possibility, okay? AP can still enter the discount if they see it that's applicable on their vendor invoice. AP can still, if that's what I understand your question. It might not be there, but they can always put it on the document itself.
Hey, Christian, I guess, I think not everybody's on the same page. Are you asking, or like what how the discount is calculated? Because you're talking about 14-day versus 30-day, so I guess we're not totally clear.
Sorry, Christian, your questions are up.
He's talking about the actual invoice, be it paper copy or the VSS portal invoice. So most of the invoices, when they come in, might have the discount already populated on the invoice, and that's what he's talking about. So if he gets an invoice through VSS, and correct me if I'm wrong, and it doesn't show the discount, and it should, how will they know what discount to take, if any? Something like that? That's part of it.
Well, if it comes through VSS and there's not a discount, are you saying, is it because the vendor didn't enter the proper discount?
Yeah, correct.
Well, if the vendor didn't enter the proper discount, like how is the AP person going to know what it should be?
Right, I agree. I would, so,
The same
even
way
though
that we've always done it is to go back and check the MA and make sure what the discount should be. But if there's an improper, if the discount on the invoice is incorrect, from VSS, can the vendor go in and change that discount after they've already entered it?
if the invoice has already been submitted to financial, they
Yes.
can't make a change. The AP person will make the change on the document. But before the vendor enters it, they should always apply, and maybe that's a training thing we need to do through our VSS, is that we need to have the vendor enter the discount when applicable.
So this might be a case where we have a net 30 contract, but the vendor is going to quote them at 1% 10. That's a possibility, and so the only way that AP would know of that, if they didn't put it on the invoice, is if Christian and his AP person, you provide the quote to AP, or it's going to be on the PO though. So they'll take the discount on the PO based on the quote that you received.
Exactly. Because they'll be on the award document, right?
Yes, it should be. If you got a quote, say it's a task order based on an MA, and you're getting better terms than what the contract was originally set up, you're going to set up that purchase order with that discount terms based on that task order. But you can, right, and then you'll modify it. Correct. Yes. Are you good now? Okay.
Will you still need to send the invoice back or somehow
You
communicate
can't
back
send the
to the
invoice
vendor?
back to the vendor.
Okay.
So I'm gonna let Joe talk about it, because he's more the VSS expert.
So when the vendor send in the invoice, it's gonna go through the two-level approval. First, the AP department, and then the OF gonna approve it. So any of those approval stage, you find out that the discount is not the same, you can always reject it. When the invoice rejected, it go back to draft. That's when the user can edit and put in the right discount. So it doesn't need to go back to the vendor. You can go back to the vendor if you want, and then they can submit another invoice. It just lengthens the process when you can actually just change it on the actual invoice.
Hey, Joe and Rosanna, let's go with this scenario, Christian scenario. The delivery order, the award document has better terms. It has a discount. So Christian has entered that at the commodity line level. The vendor doesn't enter anything on the invoice, right? So if the vendor doesn't enter anything on the invoice, the system will just take the discount from the purchase order.
Correct.
So we're good to go.
That's correct.
Okay. Any other questions? Hold on.
Off the discount topic, but same with the invoice number, accounting period. We are running into issues with the,
Right.
especially with prepays. So we get the invoice in September for October's services. We want it to take place in that accounting period for October. But it's due October 1st.
The record date, so the invoice date, so this is gonna happen even on fiscal year end. So if you want it to hit October, then you need to put the record date or that invoice as October.
Okay, so now here's the second part of that then. The vendor is indicated as within 30 days. So as soon as I put October 1st, when it runs to the PRM, it goes to October 30th
It's
or
going to wait
31st.
until October, that's correct. Now, here's what you can do, okay? So I'm going to tell you, if you need to get paid right away, this is, if it's going to wait 30 days, because that's what the award says, right? Net 30, right? But you need to do a prepayment like that. In your scenario, there is on the vendor tab, so I'm going to have Gary go there. And on disbursement information, there is a scheduled payment date. If you select September 30th or whatever that needs to be on there, then that will override the net 30 days. It should. So I have to see what you're speaking about before it does, it works. The net, it will override what the net 30 says.
So maybe you can provide her
screenshots.
which one it is. Okay.
Yeah, I gotta see the record date, so what I'll need to do is see the invoice date and see that you actually selected the scheduled payment date, okay? So, yeah, because we're doing that on a few documents right now. Nadine's been working with the sheriff department, and a lot of their payments are going in the date that they scheduled, scheduled payment date, because they had that same issue. So, and it's working, correct, Nadine? You haven't had any issues, right?
Okay, any other questions? Otherwise we'll be, okay, hold on.
Can you confirm what
Let me
it
give you
is?
an example of what I've done. Okay.
Can you just confirm what it is that we need to modify a PO for regarding the accounting stream?
So let me just give you an example of things that I've worked with a few of the departments, okay? Can I pick on Richard for a while and the sheriff department? I'm sorry. So we had some award documents that had one commodity line and 5 accounting lines. What the PRM, when the invoice is invoiced, it looks at the award document and it splits all that money against, let's say it's $100. It splits the $100 against all 4 accounting lines. But let's say I just want to pay $100 on accounting line 1. The system doesn't do that. It takes that $100 and splits it against 4 accounting lines. So that's where they're having an issue. So like you used to do in 2X, right? You said, I want to pay $100 on accounting line 1, or I want to pay $50 on accounting line 2. They were able to do that. So with Advantage 3X, you have to say, I want commodity line 1 for $100, commodity line 2 for $50, and you'll assign an accounting line to that commodity line. So those are the issues that accounts payable is having. Like I said, if you notice, there's no accounting on the invoice. So there's no way they know that you create the DO with 1 commodity line and 5 accounting lines. So they could not determine what that $100 was applied to. Does that make sense? I don't know. I'm just saying, I'm using that as an example. I was just using the commands because I've worked with a few departments that happened to.
So in this case, are you suggesting then that the purchase order then, instead of doing one commodity line with multiple accounting lines, they actually set up an individual commodity line for each accounting line?
Correct. So freight would have its own accounting line. If I had a commodity line that had use tax and the other commodity line has no tax, you would have to have 2 separate commodity lines, a commodity line with accounting line with use tax and a commodity line with an accounting line with no tax. Okay, does that make sense? in some way that they can see it. I made a couple of suggestions to OPS, but you really need to discuss that as a business process, what would work best for you. I can give you some suggestions, but you need to work as a team and see what helps AP to determine what goes.
Hold on here.
And if there's any change whatsoever to the accounting line associated with that commodity code, you'd have to go back to a modification, including like a sub-object.
Right, so here's what happens when that happens. Let's say I need to add the sub-object to that accounting line. You'll have to close that commodity line to whatever's been expensed and create a new commodity line with a new accounting line with that sub-object.
Anyone else? Okay, so want to move forward to the next issue of partials, or what's next?
So, yeah, so what's really important, so I'm gonna go on to this. Let's just go to the vendor tab then, Gary, if you don't mind. So like we had indicated, there's the discount, the disbursement information, but the address code is you could pick from the pick list, and this is really important. You'll only say, the AP office only sees the payment addresses. They don't see any order addresses or anything like that. So they're gonna pick the payment address, okay? So if there's a multiple selection, they'll pick the one that's appropriate, okay? So I'm gonna go to disbursement information. I definitely wanna hit this one. Do you see where it says disbursement format? Please, AP or anybody else, do not touch this field. It is defaulted. Do not touch this field, please, okay? Because if it's an EFT vendor or if they get a warrant, we want it to default what's on the vendor table, okay? This has caused a little bit of problem for us because people are selecting this, okay? So I'm gonna go on to the next one. So we'll leave that tab alone. And any discounts, if you want it to hit every vendor line or every combined line, excuse me, you would put your discounts at this point, okay? Or it would be populated from the MA or the award document, okay? So we're gonna go on to commodity. Yes, Richard?
Hold on.
Okay.
If you have to amend the discount terms, you do it on the vendor tab or the commodity tab?
If you want the discount to hit the entire document, you'll do it on the vendor tab. If it's one certain line, then you'll do that combined line only. I'm not sure if you had that scenario, but I want to make sure we cover it, okay? So I'm going to have Gary go on to where they're at the commodity. So if you notice on reference tab, it defaults to partial. Unless you really want it to set to final, I would leave that field alone, okay? Because you do have a lot of large award documents, correct? So there are lots of dollars. So at a point, which is really important to know, if it feels it's getting close to the award document amount, so the total amount gets to where the award, let's say it's $10,000, and I'm already at $9,500, it might want to close it. So be cautious with this field. Pay attention to it when you're getting close to the fiscal year end, okay?
Hold on, we have a question. I'm gonna lose weight today.
I have a question about this field, this partial. There is also the inverse. So if we have the negative, we have credit memo, do we select inverse over here?
That's correct.
Okay.
You would put the negative amount inside the commodity line and you would select inverse at this point, okay?
Now, I understood that they have to put in a condition code also?
Correct, and then we're gonna go through that, okay? So let's say I selected partial. We would go to the commodity then at this point. So if you notice, this is at, let's say I was only gonna invoice one. So at this point, it's gonna require me to put a condition code. So if I go to all partial payments require a condition code. So the AP will select. So if you notice, we've got a multiple variety ones. It also is going to require a comment about the condition too. And Gary's going to show you all the different ones. We got receive under because of the warehouse stuff that you do receivers, right? So it's also going to ask you a reason why you're making this a special condition, okay? So you'll have to put some type of verbiage in, what's applicable for why we're making, you could put partial payment, whatever you think is applicable at this point. Also at this point, AP percent, let's say the tax profile was use tax and we got the invoice, we can make it, if it's really sales tax, we can select from the tax profile all the different tax. So if we could search for Phoenix, we can do that. And it will show the different tax amounts there. Here's a key, if you do not see your tax rate on this list that you'll see, there's the tax profile table, please send an email to Joyce or Teresa and they will add your new tax rate to this profile table, okay? If it's no tax, of course, there is a no tax also like you had in 2X. So then we would save the document. And if you notice, there's no accounting line. So all our CAPA people, if you notice, there's no accounting line. So what I suggested, but you need to talk to ops and any other folks, I suggested to put something in the CL description because you notice the CL description has information, but it's not very big. And I think Irma indicated to me, this is also printed on your award document, right? So you need to discuss what's more applicable for you folks, okay? Because otherwise I would not know as an AP person what accounting line this is, right? Because I don't see no accounting line. And this is where the mix-up is. Okay.
If they don't put that condition code or description or comment and they've marked it as partial, is it going to close out the purchase order even though it marked it partial? It won't allow them to move forward? Because I've had that issue come up with several departments that have called that said they know they marked it as partial, but we don't think that they put in a condition code. Something wasn't...
It requires a condition code.
So it'll reject?
Yes. Your
Okay.
invoice will reject. It will
Okay.
require a condition code.
Okay.
You cannot make it, it does require a condition code.
All right.
I'd have to have an example.
Well, it's probably in one of my emails.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, it requires both. It
Okay.
requires a reason and a condition code. And it will reject, because it says partial, I'm partial, why?
Okay.
Now, here's what could happen. So I'm thinking about this. So let's say they did the, it's one of these examples and we accidentally put 2. You could still put a condition, but it will flip the flag to final.
You
Does that
guys
make
understand
sense?
that? Any hands if you don't? Okay.
Okay. So at this point, then, we're pretty much done with the document. There's the document information tab, and really there's not much more here to do, and then we would just validate and submit the document. So, and as you know, it goes through the process of going through workflow. Okay? So after this is done, then once it gets approved by your department approver, so remember, it's going to require a department approver to approve it, right? So then they approve it, and then it then goes on to DOF AP approver, and they need to apply their approval. So until you see that document of final status, you're not sure when that payment, so just pay attention to the document catalog, see if your document is, what status is in. And if you want to, you could go to the workflow list, right? This probably won't have it, but if you go track work in progress, this is not going to show it because we're in the testing environment. It will tell you at what state that document will be, who would have it, okay? Who has it in their bucket, okay?
Any questions? Was that pretty much everything you?
Well, and I kind of want to show them the vendor transaction history
Okay.
table. I think this is really important table. So you want to know if a vendor's been paid. In Advantage 2X, you had the document transaction history table, right? And DXRF, and you had the VXRF,
Right.
and all those cross-reference table. Well, the vendor transaction history table will take you to all the transactions that's taken place for that particular vendor, okay? You have to select, I'm gonna keep on talking while, yeah, I figured that. Thank you. So, yeah, that's a good one to go on. So let me kind of tell you a little bit while he's getting into production. So the production, the vendor transaction history will give you that vendor history. You could look for just your department. So if, let's say I'm Department D500, I could search for anything for D500, okay? So then there's a little great download button that's down there. You could download that and put it into an Excel spreadsheet and figure out what's been paid. You can search by the AD number, you could search by the different amounts, so. Yes.
Does that also give you INs? Because
No, it
that are
just gives you,
pending.
it will know the associated IN, but the PRM will be there.
Is there any reports that do?
You can go into the document itself, and
Only
I'm
if
gonna
you
have
know
Gary
it.
goes, and there's the, he's getting stuck, poor Gary. He's doing the driving. So if you went, so here's what you could do. If you want to see the IN document, so if you go into the Word document, you can hit document reference. There's a table that's document forward and backward reference. Have you seen those? But you must know the Word document, right? So if you know the Word document, you can go a forward reference and it'll bring up all the INs associated to it. I'm trying to understand what is it you're looking for.
We have vendors of this particular MA using VSS and our security building people processing invoices. We want to cross-reference to see what INs are sitting out there. We can see what's paid. We have those downloads after the PRM. We just can't see what's pending.
Okay, so yeah, that's a good question. Thank you for asking that. So yes, I'm aware that you would need to know that. So just so you know, I'm working with Department of Finance on creating a report that gives you any invoices that are pending payments. So we are working on a report for that. I knew that would come up, so I had suggested that to the Department of Finance, and we're working on that report right now, okay?
Is there any way that you can find the IN by the vendor invoice number?
You could go to the VIR table and bring up the vendor. So if Gary if he gets there, he'll get to the VIR table. It's the vendor invoice registry. You can look up your vendor and put in the vendor invoice number, and you can find those vendor invoices there.
And it will show if it's still IN or it's already.
It will say it's been invoiced. It doesn't say it's paid.
Is there any place that we have like a list of jump to quotes or no?
Jump to what? If
Sites.
you want to know the acronyms, you mean the acronyms? I know the Department of Finance, and if you go to their AP, I can't think of their policy and procedures manual, I provided a list of acronyms to them, and they put that in their policy and procedures manual. So you should go look at that manual. It tells you about all the acronyms and what those names mean, okay? So I would suggest to use that, right? So has anybody seen the Department of Finance's policy and procedure manual? Okay, so all your today's homework today is to go look at that policy and procedures manual they developed, because it has all those questions that, and probably answers a lot of your questions through that Department of Finance's manual. CGI did assist with helping developing that policy and procedure manual. So it tells you how to enter in documents, IN documents. It talks about entering GAXs, GAX1D documents, stuff like that.
Can we see where to find that?
Unfortunately, the system, internet seems to be something wrong with it.
Oh, okay.
And we can't get to the pages. Well,
Okay.
we went to finance to log in, but it's still, so we think that there's something wrong. So we
Okay.
can't get in. But let's see if Gary can get into the finance webpage for those documents you're talking about.
Yeah.
In the meantime, I know that there was some clarification questions that we need to ask in regards to.
To discounts. So the question was, if you change the vendor discount on the PO, it's not going to let you change that actually. You cannot change the vendor discount on the PO. You can, however, change the commodity discount on the PO. The vendor discount would have to be changed on the DO. Excuse me, on the MA.
Commodity line, and that will supersede what you have on the vendor if it's better terms. We won't change the vendor terms unless the vendor has provided us in writing that they're going to give us more favorable terms. You can change it if you have that individual quote that you got from that vendor that's giving you a better term at the commodity level. Okay? Any other questions about purchase orders while we have them look this up? Or anything? Any burning questions you've had since we went live on July 6th? Comments? Oh. No. Email notifications through CGI are not working.
Not too long after we went live, I had a contract that was expiring that day, and I had an invoice, and it wouldn't let me pay it, saying it was expired. I have one that's coming up that's going to be the same way, and I had to do a memo to the director and everything to have it extended by a day. Has that been fixed?
We turned that into PS Mag, Gary. Do you know if that was corrected or not?
No, they're in process, so that's
still
a defect, and it shouldn't work that way, but we've submitted a defect to get that fixed.
And it hasn't been fixed yet. So if you have that situation coming up, talk to your procurement officer, because the only way that it can be fixed so that your payment can go through is for us to change the expiration day by 1 day.
I may not get the final invoice until a week after the contract expires or more. So
we can always amend that contract if we need to. So the completion date was set at a certain date. If we need to extend that out, a week, 2, a month, or whatever it is, we just extend that date on that contract. It's probably better, yes. So there's something formal to do that, yes. But we can. It's very simple to do. It's a change order. We just have the director sign it from OPS and get the concurrence of the vendor. Because the way that works is when we negotiate the contract, they have an estimated completion date of that project. So that's what we put the end date of the contract is. Yeah, just the way the system works, it's going to cut the payment off because we told it that's what the system does, and it's just to amend it just for the paperwork for auditing purposes, thing like that. We just do a short amendment or a quick amendment.
We're going to be paying a bunch of invoices today and tomorrow that have 10% retainage on them. Can you quickly address the proper way to do that? Because we have heard it's not capturing the retainage.
It is taking the retainage because I know that some folks, so maybe what you're entering is that the one that you were talking to Robert about earlier this week? You haven't done it. Okay. So I have a retainage document that I can send on to you, and it talks about how to enter your retainage. You could do it at 10%, so you would do a dollar amount by 10%, okay? And it should take that retainage out, okay?
Any other questions?
And
I
so
went over
you guys
here.
are using it, right, Dave?
I want to go back to the INVSS.
Okay.
We have one that is not correct, and we're not sure what to do with it. It won't go back to the vendor.
Yeah, you can't send it back to the vendor. You'll have to get in contact with the vendor and ask them to re-enter a new one, or if you want to get a paper copy, you can enter it yourself.
Okay, then it just sits there.
No, you could discard it. You just reject it and discard that one.
Okay.
It's just a document, okay? Does
Thank
that
you.
make sense?
Any other questions? All right, so it looks like the finance has their manuals.
So this is the web page at finance. There's the advantage page here, and there's a wealth of information in here, not just for AP, but for other things and coming from Department of Finance. So we have a grant procedures manual and a fixed asset manual, and then there's the accounts payable procedures manual here. We have AP frequently asked questions here. We'll be posting this and updating that and adding more questions to it as we see frequency of the same questions coming through. So we'll be posting some more to this. On the AP frequently asked questions, it does cover that invoice date versus the tracking date difference there. And then, so let's go into accounts payable procedures manual. This is labeled as a draft because in about another 9 months or so, we'll put a final one out. So we already have a lot of edits we need to make to this one and add some more stuff to it as we're learning things as we've been going. So just keep that in mind. And then in the table of contents, everything is hyperlinked. So if you see a topic you want to look at, you can just click on it and it'll take you right there to that place since it's a 118-page document. And then toward the end there, what Rosanna was talking about, here's your wildcard symbols, your searches. Let's see, where was the thing about the acronyms?
Yeah,
There's the commonly used AP tables. So we have a lot, here's a lot of stuff here. And I think if we have time today, we'll probably cover the check rec table, maybe in the paid check table. And I'm sure everyone's familiar with the VCUS table. Those are your vendors.
So when you get back to your office, since we're down, it looks like on the website, you want to check out the VIR table, and you could look at your vendor and find your vendor invoice, okay? You can look at that.
And when we send out maybe another email, combined email, we can maybe give them some of those codes that they might use on an everyday basis.
Right.
So they don't have to search.
And then also, I do know that Joyce has sent out to some departments at times some information. Oh, I'm trying to find those job aids. Where are those located? Oh, here. So here's you'll see a 3X training material button here. So if you click on that, it provides a lot of training materials here. And there is one here on credit memo. And in that, I'll just open it and we'll show you. I just discovered this yesterday evening, so I just want to point this out to you guys. If any of you guys are using this job aid to do a credit memo, the one section that talks about the invoice date and tracking date here, these are flip-flopped. They're just the opposite of what it says here. You want to do just the opposite They're
So-
not quite right here.
And we'll get
Just
those
flip-flop it.
fixed.
Right.
We'll get those fixed.
But we do have it correct. We talk about it in the FAQ.
One important thing to note about your credit memos, it's really important to ensure that you have a debit to offset that credit. Like in Barry's case, he's had a credit sit there forever because there's no debit that sets. That happened in 2X too, you guys. I'm sure you had a lot of credits out there that didn't offset the debit, right? So that still happens in 3X too. So if you're gonna process an invoice that's a debit and you wanna take a credit, you should probably, here's what I would suggest to do. So enter your debit and then enter your credit. On both of those, I suggest to use the scheduled payment date that I showed you on the disbursement options, so that way they will be picked up at the same time, okay? Because that's really important. So I have vendor A who has a debit of $500, but then I have a vendor A has a credit of $100. If I do not tell it to pick it up at the same time, then what could possibly happen, this happened to Barry because I'm trying to help him on this one, is the debit got issued, but the credit didn't because it dispersed before the credit did, okay? So it didn't tie them together, so that's really important. That happened in 2X too, because I did have some interaction with 2X, just so you'll know. So that's important, and I'm really happy that we got MCSO on the same track. We're working with them. Nadine's been working on, and all your credits and debits are working when you're using that scheduled payment date. Am I correct to say that, Richard? Okay. So we got them all cleared up. So if you run into that situation and you need one of the AP staff to assist you from DOF, I will assist them in resolving your issues with those credits and debit memos, okay?
Okay, anything else? So I have a question for you guys. Did you find this helpful overall? Would this be something that you might want to see maybe every 3 to 6 months for us to do as a combination so that you know of changes or procedures that have changed or the most common questions or issues that come up?
Lots of nodding of heads.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure so that we can do this as a combination, because I feel it helps for you to learn what your CAPAs have to do for you AP people and vice versa, because CAPAs have a lot of information they have to enter for you, and it's very time consuming for them. And, so you need to appreciate what they're doing on their end and vice versa. So this way everybody knows what everybody goes through. So if you have no more questions, I think this was pretty successful. Unfortunately, we couldn't get production up. So we'll send out an email with those. VTH is a very good, also a code that you can go in and look for a vendor to see everything that's going on with them. And what was the other one? VIR?
VIR. And just to give you a little insight, if you send an email to Department of Finance and they need assistance, I will be around to help with that for a while, okay? So I'll be here for a little while to help with those assistance and answering your questions. Just send an email to Joyce or one of the other AP staff, and we'll do our best to help you.
All right, then with that said, unless anybody has anything else, hold on. Oh yeah, so we'll be here till about 11. If you have any questions you want us to cover that you still need, to understand, or you've developed other questions based on it. So other than that, I appreciate CGI, Rosanna, Joe, and Gary to be here, and Finance, Joyce, Teresa, and Nadine, Chad, and myself. We thank you. Have a great afternoon.
Didn't sign the signage.